Today, we're going to peel back the petals on one of nature's most captivating and, frankly, deceptive flowers. It's a story of mistaken identity, some seriously ingenious evolution, and a fragile beauty that's hidden deep in the mountain mists.
All right, let's just jump right in. I mean, look at this thing. At first glance, you see it, don't you? That startlingly familiar face just staring right back at you from the middle of a flower. But I'm telling you, the secret behind that face is way more bizarre and fascinating than it first appears.
So the big question is, did this orchid really evolve to look like a monkey? The resemblance is just uncanny, right? It's no wonder people call it the monkey orchid. But here's the thing. Our very human habit of seeing faces in everything is kind of getting in the way of the real story here. Okay, so to start digging into this mystery, we've got to look at its famous name, Dracula. And no, spoiler alert, it's not because it bites. You know, the name Dracula immediately makes you think of all that gothic vampire stuff. But the truth is actually buried in a much older language. And its real meaning is, well, it's different. But it's just as dramatic. So here's the big reveal. The name has absolutely nothing to do with vampires. It actually comes from the Latin for little dragon. How cool is that? It was named because of how the flowers look. You see those two long, kind of fang-like sepals that hang down? People thought they looked like a dragon's whiskers, or maybe even its teeth. But, of course, that hasn't stopped the scientists from having a little fun with it. Oh no, they leaned right into that whole gothic vibe, giving us these amazing species names like Dracula vampira, and, you gotta love this one, Dracula Vlad Tepes. Yep, a direct shout out to the guy who inspired the whole vampire legend. All right, so we've got the name sorted. It's a dragon, not a vampire. But that still leaves us with a face, right? If it's not a monkey, what in the world is going on here? So for us, for humans, that little monkey face is pure coincidence. It's a classic case of what's called pareidolia. You know, that thing our brains do where we see faces in clouds or burnt toast. But here's the twist. The orchid is mimicking something. It's just not trying to fool us. It's trying to fool a totally different creature.
And to get what it's doing, you need to know this one word, mycophagy. It's a fancy way of saying fungus eating. See, the Dracula orchid's real target, its true audience, are these tiny little flying insects that eat fungus, specifically fungus gnats.
And this is it. This is the great deception. Look really closely at that white textured part in the center. That's called the labellum. It doesn't just look like the gills of a mushroom. Get this, scientists have found it even smells like one. So if you're a fungus gnat looking for a meal, or maybe a place to lay your eggs, this is basically a giant irresistible billboard. So the orchid lures the gnat in, promising this delicious mushroom. But what happens next? Wow, it is an absolute masterpiece of natural engineering. It's this perfectly designed trap. First, the gnat lands, totally fooled by the mushroom look-alike. Then, oops, it slips and tumbles into this little chamber where a claw-like flap closes, gently pinning it against the flower's column. And as this poor little fly is struggling to get free, these sticky sacs of pollen, called pollinia, get glued right onto its body. And finally, the trap opens, the fly is released, and off it goes. Now an unwitting delivery service for the orchid.
And get this, that whole process, from the moment the fly gets trapped to when it's finally released, can take anywhere from 47 to 65 minutes. Can you believe that? It is just an incredibly patient and precise system.
Okay, so now that we're in on its secrets, let's take a trip to where this orchid actually lives. It's this incredibly unique and beautiful place that's just as important to its survival as that whole mushroom trek. You can find these little dragons all the way from Mexico down to Peru, and they're what you call epiphytes. That just means they live up high on the branches of trees, kind of hitching a ride on other plants without actually hurting them.
But the real heart of their kingdom, where most of them live, is a surprisingly small spot. Think about this. Over half of all the Dracula species are found in just one type of habitat in 2 countries, the cloud forests of Ecuador and Colombia. Nowhere else on Earth. Just try to picture it. These forests high up in the mountains, constantly wrapped in mist and clouds. That's the only place that has the exact cool, damp, humid conditions these super specialized orchids need to even survive. It really is a world hidden in the clouds. But this magical world is in serious trouble. And that means the future of the Dracula orchid is too. This is where the story takes a really urgent turn. 70%.
Just let that number sink in for a second. That one single number tells a pretty devastating story about what's happening to our little dragons.
Yeah, a big recent study found that nearly 7 out of every 10 Dracula species are now threatened with extinction. And after everything we've just learned about how incredibly complex they are, that number, it just hits different, doesn't it? So why is this happening? Well, the threats are really clear, and they're all driven by us. Their cloud forest homes are being cut down for farms and for livestock. The flowers themselves are being illegally snatched from the wild to be sold, and on top of all that, climate change is messing with the very misty, cloudy conditions they need to live. And the experts, the researchers and conservationists who are actually there, they're not holding back. They are calling this situation urgent. It's just such a stark reminder, isn't it? This incredibly intricate flower, this master of deception that we thought was a monkey, is literally teetering on the edge of survival, all because its hidden home in the mist is just disappearing. And that's what the story of the Dracula orchid really makes you think about. I mean, if a creature this bizarre and this wonderful can be quietly slipping away, what other natural wonders, what other incredible secrets are we losing before we even get a chance to understand them?